His car died on a Tuesday, the engine sputtering out with a quiet sigh that felt more like surrender than failure. It was the kind of silence that was louder than any noise, a stillness that meant he was stranded. Again Leo Vance gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the cracked leather, his gaze fixed on the endless stretch of highway that disappeared into the hazy horizon beside him. His daughter, Maya, stirred in her sleep, her small hand clutching a roller, half-eaten bag of crackers, her breath a soft, steady rhythm against the sudden, unnerving quiet of the world. He was out of money, out of options, and out of time. The last of their savings had gone into the tank of gas he'd bought. That morning, the promise of a job interview in a city 3 states away now felt like a cruel joke whispered on the wind. His phone had no signal. The sun was starting to dip low, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange, and a cold that had nothing to do with the weather was seeping into his bones. He let out a slow breath, the kind that didn't release tension, just acknowledged it. He looked over at Maya, her face peaceful in sleep, her trust in him so absolute, so unwavering. It broke his heart a little more every time he felt like he was failing her. He had promised her a new start, a place with a real backyard, a school where she could make friends, a life that wasn't lived out of boxes and borrowed time. And now they were here, stuck on the shoulder of a forgotten highway, with nothing but a broken engine, and a sky that was growing darker by the minute. He could feel the panic clawing at the edges of his calm, that familiar, icy grip of a man who had been at the bottom before and knew how hard it was to climb back up. But then he looked at Maya again, at the way her brow furrowed slightly in her sleep, and he knew he couldn't let her see the fear. He couldn't let the cracks in his armor show. Not yet. He was her father, her protector, her whole world. And if he broke, then everything broke. He took another breath, this one steadier, and reached into the glove compartment, pulling out an old, worn map. He unfolded it slowly, the creases soft as old linen, and stared at the tangle of lines and names. There was a town nearby, or at least what the map called a town, a tiny dot, labeled Harmony Springs. He had no idea what he would find there. Maybe a garage, maybe just a gas station with a broken payphone, maybe nothing at all. But it was something. It was a direction. It was hope. And for a man with nothing else, hope was everything. He gently shook. Maya awake, her eyes fluttered, open, sleepy and confused. "Are we there yet?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Not yet, sweetheart," Leo said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. "Just a little detour." He didn't tell her the car was broken, he didn't tell her they were stranded, he just told her they were going on an adventure, a walking adventure. He helped her out of the Bridum car, bundled her into her too big jacket, and took her hand, her fingers small and warm, in his. "Come on, kiddo," he said, starting down the road. "Let's see what we can find." And as they walked into the fading light with the quiet hum of the empty highway at their back, Leo held on to that one thought like a prayer. Maybe they weren't walking toward another dead end. Maybe they were walking toward a beginning. Walking felt different when you had no choice in the matter. Every step was a calculation, a silent prayer that his worn-out boots would hold together, and that the ache in his back wouldn't become something worse. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky the color of a fading bruise. Maya held his hand tightly, her small legs working hard to keep up with his longer stride. She didn't complain. She never did. She just chattered about the shapes she saw in the clouds, and the names she'd give to the rocks. They passed on the side of the road. Her innocence was a shield against the creeping despair in Leo's chest. A small, bright flame in the growing dark. After what felt like an eternity, a single flickering light appeared in the distance. A warm yellow glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. It was a sign, weathered and tilting slightly to one side, its letters faded but still legible. Vance, daughter Otto. Leo stopped, his breath catching in his throat. Vance, it was his last name. a strange, impossible coincidence that felt like a sign or a cruel twist of fate. He hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should trust it, but Maya was already pulling him forward. "Look, Daddy, a garage. Maybe they can fix the car." He nodded, and they walked toward the light. The garage was small. Old-fashioned, built from weathered wood and corrugated tin, it looked like it belonged to a different era, a time when things were built to last and people fixed what was broken. Instead of throwing it away, the bay door was open and a soft light spilled out from inside. Along with the faint smell of motor oil and old coffee, a figure was hunched over an engine, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, a smudge of grease on one cheek. As they got closer, the figure straightened and turned, and Leo's breath caught again. It was a woman. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, a few strands escaping to frame a face that was both strong and tired. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, intelligent and watchful. She wore grease-stained coveralls and held a wrench in one hand like it was an extension of her arm. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was low, steady, with a hint of something he couldn't quite place, not suspicion but caution. She looked them over, taking in Leo's dusty clothes and Maya's too big jacket, her gaze lingering for a moment on the worry in his eyes. "Our car broke down a few miles back," Leo said, his own voice sounding rougher than he'd intended. "Engine just cut out." The woman nodded once, setting the wrench down on a nearby workbench. "Where is it?" "Back on the highway, about 2 miles east." She wiped her hands on a rag, a slow, deliberate motion. "All right," she said. "Hop in the truck. I'll give you a lift. We'll see if we can tow it back here." Leo was taken aback by her simple, unquestioning willingness to help. He'd expected a fee, a long list of questions, reason why she couldn't, but there was none of that. Just a quiet acceptance of a problem that needed solving. "I don't have much to pay you with right now." He admitted the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. "I was on my way to a job." The woman looked at him, then at Maya, who was hiding shyly behind his leg, and her expression softened for a fraction of a second. "We'll figure it out later," she said, her voice a little gentler now. "Right now, let's just get you out of the cold." She turned and gestured toward an old pickup truck parked beside the garage, its paint faded and its bumper held on with what looked like sheer willpower. "Come on," she said. "The heater works most of the time." Leo hesitated for one more moment, then looked down at Maya's hopeful face and nodded. "Okay," he said, and for the first time all day a sliver of warmth that had nothing to do with a heater started to spread through his chest. The inside of the truck smelled like old vinyl and something faintly metallic. The heater groaned to life with a blast of lukewarm air, but it was enough to chase away the chill that had settled deep in their bones. Maya sat between them, her small body a warm, solid presence, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and curiosity. She kept glancing at the woman who was driving with a quiet, focused competence, her hands steady on the wheel. "I'm Ilara," the woman said after a few minutes of silence, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Leo, and this is Maya." Maya gave a small wave, her shyness slowly melting away. "Are you the daughter?" she asked, pointing to the sign they had passed. Ilara's hands tightened on the wheel for a fraction of a second, so small Leo might have missed it if he hadn't been watching her so closely. "Something like that," she said, her voice even. "This place belonged to my father." Leo didn't press for more. He knew what it was like to carry the weight of a past you didn't always want to talk about. They found the car, a dark, silent shape on the side of the road. Ilara pulled the truck in front of it and got out with a practiced efficiency that surprised Leo. She had the tow cables out and hooked up in minutes, her movements sure and steady like she'd done this 100 times before. As they drove back to the garage with the broken-down minivan trailing behind them, Maya fell asleep, her head resting against Leo's shoulder, the rhythmic rumble of the truck lulling her into a peaceful slumber. Ilara glanced over at them, her expression unreadable in the dim light of the dashboard. "She's a sweet kid," she said quietly. "Yeah," Leo replied, his voice thick with a love that was almost painful in its intensity. "She's everything." They didn't speak again for the rest of the ride. The silence between them was not awkward but full of unspoken things, the weight of their separate struggles, the quiet recognition of two people who understood what it meant to be alone in the world. When they got back to the garage, Ilara unhooked the car and pushed it into the bay with a strength that belied her slender frame. She lifted the hood and peered inside, a small flashlight held between her teeth. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Leo stood nearby, feeling useless and out of place, his hands in his pockets, his pride a heavy weight in his chest. "It's the alternator," she said after a few minutes, her voice muffled by the flashlight. "I can fix it, but I'll have to order the part. It won't be here until tomorrow." Leo's heart sank. "How much?" he asked, dreading the answer. She straightened up and looked at him, her eyes meeting his in the dim light. "Don't worry about that right now," she said. "You and your daughter need a place to stay tonight. There's an apartment above the garage. It's not much, but it's warm, and it's empty." Leo was stunned. He didn't know what to say. He had walked into this town, a stranger with nothing to offer, and this woman had shown him nothing but kindness. "Why?" he asked, the word escaping him before he could stop it. "Why are you doing this?" Ilara looked away for a moment, her gaze landing on the sleeping form of Maya in the truck. "Because I know what it's like to be stranded," she said, her voice so quiet he almost couldn't hear it. "And because everyone deserves a safe place to land." Her words hung in the air, between them a fragile bridge built of shared understanding, and for the first time in a very long time, Leo felt like he wasn't carrying the weight of the world entirely on his own. The apartment above the garage was simple but clean. It smelled of lemon polish and old wood, a comforting scent that reminded Leo of his grandmother's house. There was a small kitchen with a worn-out linoleum floor, a cozy living room with a faded floral couch, and a single bedroom with a quilt-covered bed. Ilara had called it not much, but to Leo and Maya it felt like a palace. "You can take the bed," Leo said to Maya, who was exploring the small space with wide-eyed wonder. "I'll sleep on the couch." Maya didn't argue. She was already climbing onto the bed, her small hands tracing the stitched patterns on the quilt. "It's so soft," she whispered, her voice full of awe. Ilara stood in the doorway, a silent observer, a faint smile playing on her lips. "There are some extra blankets in the closet," she said. "And there's food in the fridge. Help yourself to whatever you find." Leo turned to her, his gratitude a clumsy thing he didn't know how to express. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. "You don't have to," she replied. "Just get some rest." She turned to leave but hesitated for a moment, her hand on the doorknob. "If you need anything," she said, "I'll be in the garage." And then she was gone, the sound of her footsteps fading down the wooden stairs, leaving Leo and Maya in a bubble of warmth and quiet safety. Leo tucked Maya into bed, pulling the Garage Pulse's Party6.com quilt up to her chin. She was asleep in minutes, her face peaceful in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. He stood there for a long time, watching her breathe his heart, a tight knot of love and fear, and a new, unfamiliar feeling he couldn't quite name. Gratitude was part of it, but it was more than that. It was a sense of connection, a feeling of being seen by a stranger who somehow understood the parts of him he tried so hard to hide. He walked back into the living room and sank onto the couch, the springs groaning in protest. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes, the exhaustion of the day washing over him in a heavy wave. He should have been worried about the car, about the money, about the future, but for the first time in months, his mind was quiet. He wasn't a man on the run, he wasn't a failure, he was just a father in a warm apartment with his daughter sleeping safely in the next room, and for tonight that was enough. He drifted off to Sleep not to the sound of a sputtering engine or the hum of a lonely highway, but to the gentle rhythm of rain starting to tap against the window pane. A soft lullaby that promised a new day was coming. He woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, a scent so foreign and comforting. It took him a moment to place where he was. The morning light was filtering through the window, casting a soft glow on the unfamiliar room. He sat up, his back stiff from the couch, and saw Ilara standing in the small kitchen, a frying pan in one hand and a spatula in the other. She was wearing the same grease-stained coveralls from the night before, but her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked different in the prettervescent daylight, less like a mechanic and more like someone playing a part. "Morning," she said, her voice a little brighter than it had been the night before. "I thought you might be hungry." Leo ran a hand through his hair, feeling disheveled and out of place. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied with a small smile. "But I was hungry too." Maya appeared in the doorway, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Her face lit up when she saw the bacon. "Is that for us?" she asked, her voice full of hope. "It is," Ilara said, "but only if you wash your hands first." Maya scurried off to the bathroom, and Leo watched her go, a warmth spreading through his chest that had nothing to do with the coffee he could smell brewing. They ate breakfast at the small kitchen table, the three of them, like a strange makeshift family. The bacon was crispy, the eggs were perfectly cooked, and the coffee was strong and black, just the way Leo liked it. Maya chattered nonstop, telling Ilara all about her favorite books, her best friend from her old school, and her dream of one day having a dog. Ilara listened intently, her chin resting on her hand, her eyes full of a genuine interest that made Maya's stories seem like the most important thing in the world. After breakfast, Leo offered to help clean up, but Ilara waved him off. "You're the guest," she said. "Go relax, I'll take care of this." He hesitated, feeling a familiar pang of pride, the need to be useful, to contribute, to not be a burden, but something in Ilara's expression told him to let it go. That wasn't offering charity. She was offering a moment of peace, and he was too tired to refuse it. He sat on the couch watching her, as she moved around the small kitchen, with a quiet competence, her movements graceful and sure. There was a prostat eta stillness about her, a self-contained strength that he found both intimidating and alluring. He noticed a small detail, then something he hadn't seen the night before, a thin silver chain around her neck with a single small key hanging from it. It was a delicate piece of jewelry, strangely out of place with her grease-stained coveralls. It was a clue, a hint of a life beyond the garage, a life he knew nothing about. He didn't ask her about it. He didn't want to break the fragile spell of the morning, the quiet comfort of being in a warm kitchen with a kind stranger who had somehow made them feel at home. He just sat there and watched her, his heart full of a quiet wonder and the dawning realization that he was starting to feel something for this woman, something more than just gratitude, something that both terrified and thrilled him. The part for the car arrived in the early afternoon, a small brown box delivered by a gruff-looking man in a dusty pickup truck. Ilara signed for it with a practiced hand and carried it into the garage. Her movements, all business. Once again, Leo followed her, feeling the familiar pull of responsibility he couldn't let her do all the work he had to contribute somehow. "Let me help," he said as she opened the box and pulled out the new alternator. "I know my way around an engine." Ilara looked at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "You sure?" she asked. "I am," he replied, with a confidence he hadn't felt in days. "I used to work in a garage back in the city before," he trailed off, not wanting to bring up the past. "Before," she finished for him, her voice soft, with an understanding that needed no explanation. "All right," she said, handing him a wrench. "Let's get to work." They worked side by side for the next few hours, the silence between them filled with the comfortable clatter of tools and the low hum of the fanner. Garage's old radio playing a forgotten country song, Leo was surprised by how easily they fell into a rhythm. He knew what she needed before she asked for it, and she seemed to anticipate his every move. It was like they had been working together for years, not just a few hours. Maya sat on a nearby stool watching them with a focused intensity, her chin resting on her hands. She was drawing in a small notebook that Alara had given her, a series of colorful pictures that chronicled their adventure. The broken-down car, the tow truck, the warm apartment, the bacon for breakfast. "What are you drawing?" Leo asked during a lull in the work. She held up the notebook to show him a picture of the three of them standing in front of the garage. Alara was in the middle, holding a giant wrench and smiling. Leo and Maya were on either side of her, their hands linked. "It's our new family," she said with a proud grin. Leo's heart did a little flip-flop. He looked at Alara, who was trying to hide a smile behind her hand. Her cheeks were flushed, a faint pink that had nothing to do with the warmth of the garage. I didn't know what to say, so he just cleared his throat and went back to work. But the image of Maya's drawing stayed with him, a bright, colorful promise of something he hadn't dared to hope for. They finished the car, just as the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the garage floor. Alara wiped her hands on a rag and leaned against the workbench, a look of satisfaction on her face. "All done," she said. "Should run like new now." Leo closed the hood with a solid thud and turned to her. "I don't know how to repay you." He said the words, feeling inadequate for the depth of his gratitude. "I'll figure something out, I promise." "I'm not worried about it," she said, her gaze soft and steady. "I'm glad I could help." There was a moment of silence, then a moment that stretched into something more. It was the moment when he should have said goodbye. The moment when he should have packed up their things and gotten back on the road. But the thought of leaving felt like a betrayal, like he was walking away from something important, something he might never find again. "Stay for dinner," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "Let me cook for you this time." Alara's eyes widened in surprise. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I want to," he replied, his voice firm. "It's the least I can do." She hesitated for a moment, her gaze searching his, as if looking for something he couldn't name. Then she nodded, a slow smile spreading across her face. "All right," she said, "I'd like that." And in that moment Leo knew that he wasn't just staying for dinner, he was staying for something more, something he was just beginning to understand. Leo was a surprisingly good cook. Skill he had learned out of necessity. After his wife passed away, he moved around Alara's small kitchen with a confidence that she found both endearing and a little intimidating. He found a package of chicken in the fridge, some vegetables in the crisper, and a bag of rice in the cupboard, and within an hour he had created a meal that smelled and looked like something out of a gourmet magazine. Alara sat at the table watching him, her chin resting on her hand, a sense of wonder filling her. She had spent most of her life surrounded by people who had personal chefs and caterers, people who wouldn't know how to boil water if their lives depended on it. And here was this man, this stranger, who had walked into her life with nothing but the clothes on his back and a broken-down car, and he was cooking for her with a skill and grace that was both humbling and incredibly attractive. Maya sat beside her, coloring in her notebook and humming a blasto, and he having humming a commodid little tune to herself. She was completely at ease. In this small apartment, with this woman she had only just met. It was as if she had always been here, as if this was where she belonged. The thought sent a pang of longing through Alara's chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to experience in a very long time. She had built her life around a carefully constructed wall of independence, a fortress of self-sufficiency that kept everyone at a safe distance. But this man and his daughter had somehow found a crack in that wall, a small opening that was slowly but surely widening with every passing moment. When dinner was ready, Leo served it with a flourish that made Maya giggle. He had set the table with the mismatched plates and silverware he had found in the cupboard, and had even lit a candle that he had discovered in a drawer, a small flickering flame that cast a warm and intimate glow on the small room. "It's beautiful," Ilara said, her voice a little choked with emotion. "Thank you." They ate in a comfortable silence, the only sound, the clinking of their forks against the plates and the soft murmur of the rain that had started to fall. Outside, it was a simple meal, but it felt like a feast, a celebration of something new and fragile and full of promise after dinner. Maya fell asleep on the couch, her head in Ilara's lap, her small body radiating a warmth that seeped into Ilara's soul. Leo sat in a nearby chair watching them, a soft smile on his face. "She's taken to you," he said, his voice low and intimate. "She's easy to love." Ilara replied, her hand stroking Maya's hair. "You're good with her," he said. "You have a natural way with her. That—" he trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "That reminds you of her mother?" Ilara asked, her voice gentle. "Yeah," he admitted, his own voice a little thick. "It does." He looked at her, then really looked at her, his gaze full of a raw vulnerability that made her heart ache. "I miss her," he said. "Every day." "I know," she whispered, her own eyes filling with tears. "I know what it's like to miss someone you can never have back." They sat in silence for a long time after that. The weight of their shared grief, a heavy but comforting presence in the room. It was a bond they hadn't expected, a connection forged in the crucible of loss, and it was a bond that was stronger than any they had ever known before. The next day dawned gray, and overcast. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy with unshed tears, a fitting reflection of the mood that had settled over the small apartment. Leo knew he had to leave. He couldn't stay here forever. He had a job interview to get to, a new life, to build for himself and Maya. But the thought of saying goodbye to Ilara felt like a physical ache, a tearing in his chest, that he wasn't sure he could endure. He packed their meager belongings with a heavy heart, his movements slow and deliberate. Maya watched him, her eyes full of a quiet sadness that mirrored his own. "Do we have to go?" she asked, her voice small and fragile. "We do, sweetheart," he said, his own voice breaking a little. "But we'll be back, I promise." He didn't know if it was a promise he could keep, but he had to say it for her. For himself, he found Ilara in the garage, standing by the workbench, her back to him. She was cleaning a tool, her movements jerky and uneven. "We're ready to go," he said, his voice sounding hollow in the cavernous space. She didn't turn around. "All right," she said, her own voice muffled. "I just wanted to thank you again," he said, "for everything." "You don't have to," she replied, her voice still tight. "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," he said, stepping closer to her. "It was everything." She finally turned to him, her eyes red and swollen. "Don't," she whispered, her voice a raw plea. "Don't make this harder than it already is." "I don't want to go." He admitted, the words spilling out of him like a confession. "I want to stay here with you." Her face crumpled then, and the tears she had been holding back streamed down her cheeks. "You can't," she said, her voice choked with sobs. "You have a life to build, a future to create. You can't throw it all away for a woman who lives in a garage." "You're not just a woman who lives in a garage," he said, his own eyes filling with tears. "You're the most amazing woman I've ever met." He took her in his arms, then holding her tight as she cried, her body shaking with the force of her grief. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if they would ever see each other again. But in that moment he knew one thing for sure. He was in love with Ilara Vance, and he would never be the same again. The drive away from Harmony Springs was the hardest thing Leo had ever done. Every mile felt like a betrayal, a tearing away from a part of himself. He had only just discovered Maya was quiet in the back seat, her chin resting on her chest, her small hands clutching the drawing she had made of their new family. She didn't cry, but her silence was more heartbreaking than any tears could have been. Leo drove on autopilot, his mind a numb void, his heart a heavy leaden weight in his chest. He know where he was going. He didn't care. He just knew he had to keep moving. He had to put as much distance as possible between himself and the woman he had left behind. He drove for hours, the scenery a blur of greens and browns and grays. He didn't stop for food, he didn't stop for gas, he just drove until the sun began to set, and the sky turned a fiery orange and red. He pulled into a rest stop, a lonely, desolate place, with a single picnic table and a rusty trash. Kenny got out of the car and stood by the side of the road, his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He could still feel Alara's arms around him. He could still taste her tears on his lips. He could still hear her voice, whispering his name. It was a ghost that would haunt him for the rest of his days. He knew he had made the right decision. He had to think of Maya. He had to give her a stable life, a future full of promise. But the right decision didn't always feel right. Sometimes it felt like a knife twisting in your gut, a slow, agonizing death of the soul. He sank onto the picnic table, his head in his hands, his body shaking with the force of his own silent sobs. He had been strong for so long he had held it together for Maya's sake, but now in the lonely twilight of a forgotten rest stop, he finally allowed himself to break. He cried for his wife, for the life they had lost, for the future they would never have, he cried. For himself, for the man he had become, a man who was afraid to love, afraid to hope, afraid to take a chance on happiness. He cried for Alara, for the woman he had left behind, the woman who had shown him what it meant to be truly alive, and as the tears streamed down his face, he knew that he had made a terrible mistake. He had walked away from the one person who had ever truly seen him, and he would regret it for the rest of his life. Alara stood in the doorway of the garage. Watching the taillights of Leo's car disappear into the darkness, she felt a hollowness in her chest, a vast empty space where her heart used to be. She had known it would hurt to see him go, but she hadn't been prepared for the sheer agony of it. It was a pain that was both physical and emotional, a tearing of the soul that left her feeling raw and exposed. She walked back into the garage, the smell of oil and grease and coffee, suddenly feeling alien and unfamiliar. This place had been her sanctuary, her refuge from the world, but now it just felt like a prison, a constant reminder of what she had lost. She picked up the wrench. She had been cleaning her fingers, tracing its cool metal surface. She had spent her life fixing things, cars, engines, machines, but she didn't know how to fix this. She didn't know how to mend a broken heart, her own or his. She sank onto the stool by the workbench, her head in her hands, her body racked with sobs. She had been so careful. She had built her walls so high and so thick, but Leo and Maya had breached them with their quiet kindness, their gentle love, their unwavering belief in the goodness of people. They had shown her what it was like to be part of a family, to belong to something bigger than herself. And now they were gone, and she was alone again, more alone than she had ever been before. She didn't know how long she sat there crying, but when she finally lifted her head, the garage was dark, the only light coming from the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. She looked around at the tools, the machines, the half-finished projects, and she knew she couldn't stay here. Not anymore. This place was full of ghosts, the ghosts of her father, the ghost of the life she had tried to build for herself, and now the ghost of Leo and Maya. She had to leave. She had to find a new place, a new life, a new way to be. In the world, she didn't know where she would go, but she knew she had to go somewhere. Somewhere she could forget. Somewhere she could start over. Somewhere she could try to put the pieces of her broken heart back together again. She stood up and walked to the small apartment above the garage. She packed a single bag with a few clothes, a toothbrush, and the drawing that Maya had given her. She looked around the small space one last time, her gaze lingering on the faded, floral couch, where she had held Maya in her arms, the small kitchen table where she had shared a meal with Leo, the bed where he had slept. She took a deep breath and walked out the door. Not looking back, she got into her own car, a sleek black sports car. that had been hidden in the back of the garage, a relic of a life she had tried to leave behind. She started the engine, the powerful roar, a stark contrast to the quiet hum of the old pickup truck she had been driving. She pulled out of the garage and onto the highway, the road stretching out before her like a long, dark ribbon. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing for sure. She was going to find Leo and Maya, and she was going to tell them that she loved them, and that she was never going to let them go again. Leo drove for 2 days straight, fueled by a desperate hope that was as irrational as it was powerful. He had no idea where Ilara had gone. He had no way of contacting her. But he had to try. He had to find her. He had to tell her that he had made a mistake. He arrived back in Harmony Springs in the middle of the night. The town was dark and quiet. The only sign of life, the single flickering street lamp in the center of town. He pulled up to the garage and his heart sank. It was dark and empty. The bay door was closed, and a small handwritten sign was taped to the front door closed. Until further notice, he got out of the car, his legs feeling weak, shaky. He walked up to the door and peered through the small glass window. The garage was empty. The tools were gone. The machines were covered in white sheets. It was as if no one had ever been there. His hope turned to despair, a cold, heavy weight that settled in his stomach. He had been too late. He had lost her forever. He sank to his knees on the cold concrete, his head in his hands, his body shaking with the force of his grief. He had been a fool. He had thrown away the one chance at happiness he had ever had. He stayed there for a long time, kneeling in the darkness, his heart a shattered wreck in his chest. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know where to go. He was lost and alone, and he had no one to blame but himself. He was about to give up, to get back in his car and drive away, to disappear into the darkness, when he saw a small piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper of his car. He stood up and walked over to it, his hands trembling as he pulled it free. It was a drawing. Maya's drawing, the one she had made of their new family. On the back, in Ilara's neat handwriting, were 2 words: "I'm sorry," and an address. An address. In a city 3 states away. A city where he had been heading for a job interview that now seemed like a distant memory. A flicker of hope ignited in his chest, a small, fragile flame in the darkness of his despair. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't given up on him. She had just gone ahead. She was waiting for him. He got back in the car, his heart pounding with a renewed sense of purpose. He started the engine and pulled out of the garage, his tires screeching on the loody pavement. He was going to find her. He was going to tell her that he loved her and that he was never going to let her go again. The address Ilara had left was in a part of the city Leo had only ever seen in movies. The streets were lined with towering skyscrapers of glass and steel. The sidewalks were crowded with people in expensive suits and designer dresses, and the air was thick with the smell of money and power. He felt a surge of doubt, a familiar feeling of inadequacy. He didn't belong here. He was a small-town mechanic in a world of billionaires and titans of industry. What could he possibly offer a woman who had everything? He was about to turn around, to drive away, to retreat back to the safety of his own small world. When he saw her, she was standing on the steps of a magnificent building, a modern marvel of architecture that seemed to touch the sky. She was wearing a simple black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places. Her hair was styled in a chic updo, and she was surrounded by a phalanx of security guards and assistants. She looked like a queen in her castle, a goddess in her temple. She was beautiful and powerful and completely out of his league. But then she saw him, and her face lit up with a smile that was so full of love and joy that it took his breath away. She said something to one of her assistants, and then she was running down the steps toward him, her heels clicking on the pavement, her dress flowing behind her like a cape. He got out of the car and met her in the middle of the street, the traffic screeching to a halt around them. They didn't say a word. They just held each other tight, their bodies pressed together, their hearts beating as one. "I love you," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too," she replied, her own voice choked with tears. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I was a fool to ever let you go." "It doesn't matter," she said. "We're together now. That's all that matters." They stood there for a long time in the middle of the street, oblivious to the honking cars and the staring people. They were, in their own world, a world of love and forgiveness and second chances, and in that moment, Leo knew that he was finally home. He had found the one person who made him feel whole, the one person who saw him for who he was, not for what he had, and he knew that he would spend the rest of his life making her happy. He had been a man without a future, a man without a hope, a man without a dream. But now he had everything he had ever wanted, and more. He had Alara, and he had a love that was stronger than any engine, more powerful than any machine, a love that would last a lifetime and beyond. Alara led Leo into the towering skyscraper, which he soon learned was the headquarters of her global technology empire, Vance Industries. The lobby was a Randstason Station 7T, cavernous space of polished marble and shimmering glass, with a waterfall cascading down one wall and a giant holographic logo of the company floating in the air. Leo felt a sense of vertigo, a feeling of being a small, insignificant speck in a vast and overwhelming universe. People in sharp suits and power dresses bustled around them, their faces a mixture of curiosity and deference. They all knew who Alara was, but they had no idea who he was, and he could feel their eyes on him. Their silent questions and judgments. Alara seemed oblivious to the attention. She held his hand tightly, her fingers intertwined with her touch, a grounding force in the swirling chaos around them. She led him to a private elevator that whisked them up to the top floor in a matter of seconds. The doors opened onto a magnificent penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city. The apartment was decorated in a minimalist style, with clean lines and a neutral color palette, but it was also filled with personal touches, a collection of antique books on a shelf, a grand piano in the corner, a series of black and white photographs on the wall. "This is my home," Alara said, her voice a little hesitant. "It's not much, but it's beautiful." "Leo," said, cutting her off, "just like you." He walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights twinkling below him like a sea of stars. "I can't believe this is your life," he said, his voice full of awe. "It's a gilded cage," she replied, coming to stand beside him. "It's a life of luxury and privilege, but it's also a life of loneliness and isolation." She turned to him, her eyes full of a deep and abiding sadness. "I've been surrounded by people my whole life," she said, "but I've never felt more alone." "You're not alone anymore," he said, taking her in his arms. "You have me, and you have Maya." "I know," she whispered, her voice full of a gratitude that was almost painful to hear. "And that's all that matters." They stood there for a long time, watching the city lights and dreaming of a future together, a future that was full of love and laughter and the quiet joy of simply being together. They had come from two different worlds, but they had found a common ground in their shared love and their shared desire for a real and meaningful life. They wouldn't be easy. They knew that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, but they were determined to make it work. They were a team, a family, and they were ready to face whatever the world threw at them together. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Alara introduced Leo to her world, a world of board meetings and charity galas, of private jets and five-star restaurants, and he introduced her to his, a world of scraped knuckles and grease-stained hands, of quiet evenings at home, and the simple joy of watching their daughter grow and learn. They were an unlikely couple, a study in contrasts, but they were also a perfect match. They complemented each other in ways they had never expected. He grounded her with his quiet strength and his down-to-earth practicality, and she inspired him with her brilliant mind and her passionate heart. Maya was in heaven. She had a new home, a new school, and a new mother figure who adored her. She blossomed in the warmth of their love, her laughter filling the once silent penthouse with a joy that was contagious. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were those in Ilara's world who looked down on Leo, who saw him as an opportunist, a gold digger, a man who was not worthy of her love. And there were those in his own small world who were suspicious of her, who saw her as an outsider, a woman who could never truly understand their way of life. But they didn't let the negativity get to them. They were too busy building a life together, a life that was based on love and trust and mutual respect. They bought a small house in the suburbs, a cozy place with a big backyard, and a tire swing hanging from an old oak tree. Ilara still ran her company, but she did it from home. Now her priorities had shifted. She was no longer interested in conquering the world. She was interested in creating a home. Leo opened up his own garage, a small shop in the heart of their new town. He was doing what he loved, what he was good at, and he was his own boss. He was a happy man, a fulfilled man, a man who had found his purpose in life. They were a family, a strange and peaty, wonderful and perfectly imperfect family. And they were happy, happier than they had ever been before they had found their own little slice of heaven. Their own harmony springs in the midst of a chaotic and often unforgiving world. They knew that as long as they had each other, they could face anything that life threw their way. They were a testament to the power of love, the power of forgiveness, and the power of second chances. They were a reminder that sometimes the most unlikely of couples can create the most beautiful of love stories. One sunny afternoon, as they were all working in the garden together, Maya looked up at Leo and Ilara with a serious expression on her face. "Are you guys ever going to get married?" she asked, her voice full of a child's innocent curiosity. Leo and Ilara looked at each other, a slow smile spreading across their faces. "I don't know," Leo said, winking at Maya. "What do you think we should do?" "I think you should," she said with a decisive nod. "I think you should have a big party and invite all of our friends, and I think you should wear a pretty white dress, and you should wear a handsome black suit." Ilara laughed, her heart full of a love that was so big it felt like it might burst. "Well," she said, "I think that's a wonderful idea." And so they did. They got married in their own backyard, surrounded by their family and friends. It was a simple ceremony, but it was also the most beautiful wedding Leo had ever seen. Ilara wore a simple white dress that flowed around her like a cloud, and Leo wore a handsome black suit that made him look like a movie star. Maya was the flower girl, her basket overflowing with rose petals that she scattered with joyful abandon. They said their vows under the shade of the old oak tree, their voices thick with emotion, their eyes full of a love that was as deep and as wide as the sky above them. It was a perfect day, a perfect wedding, a perfect start to their new life together. And as they danced their first dance as husband and wife, the sun setting in a blaze of glory behind them, they knew that they had found their happily ever after. They had found their forever love, their forever family, their forever home. And they knew that they would live happily ever after, not because it was a fairy tale, but because they had created their own fairy tale, a real-life fairy tale that was more beautiful and more magical than any story ever written. They had found their harmony, their balance, their perfect rhythm, and they knew that they would dance together for the rest of their lives, their hearts beating as one, their souls intertwined forever and ever. Amen. The years passed in a happy blur of scraped knees and bedtime stories of family vacations and holiday traditions. Leo and Ilara's love deepened and grew stronger, with each passing year a quiet, steady flame that warmed their home, their hearts. Maya grew into a beautiful and intelligent young woman with her mother's brilliant mind and her father's kind heart. She went off to college and then to law school, and then she came home to work for her mother's company. Her passion for justice and her commitment to making the world a better place, a source of constant pride for her parents. Leo's garage flourished. It became a beloved institution in their town, a place where people came not just to get their cars fixed, but to catch up on the local gossip and to soak up the warmth of Leo's quiet wisdom. Ilara continued to run her company with a steady hand and a compassionate heart. She was a respected and admired leader, a woman who had proven that you could be both successful and kind. But their greatest joy was their family, their love for each other, and their shared life was a testament to the power of second chances and the enduring strength of the human heart. They were a reminder that it's never too late to find happiness, to find love, to find your place in the world. One evening, as they were sitting on their porch swing, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight, Ilara leaned her head on Leo's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked, her voice soft and nostalgic. "The day we met?" "Every day," he replied, his own voice thick with emotion. "It was the best and worst day of my life." "Mine too," she said with a small laugh. "I was so lost and so alone. And then you and Maya walked into my life, and everything changed. You changed my life too," he said, his voice a low whisper. "You taught me how to hope again, how to love again, how to live again." They sat in silence for a long time after that, their hands intertwined, their hearts full of a love that was as timeless. As the stars above them, they had come a long way from that lonely rest stop on a forgotten highway. They had built a life together, a beautiful and meaningful life, a life that was full of love and laughter and joy, and as they sat there on their porch swing in the twilight of their years, they knew that they were the luckiest people in the world. They had found their soulmates, their best friends, their forever loves, and they knew that they would be together for all of eternity. Their love, a shining beacon in the darkness, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, to overcome adversity and to find happiness. In the most unexpected of places, their story was a love story for the ages, a story of two people from two different worlds who found a common ground in their shared humanity, their shared love, and their shared dream of a better world. It was a story that would be told and retold for generations to come, a story that would inspire hope and faith and love in all who heard it. It was the story of Leo and Ilara, a story of a love that was as real and as true and as beautiful as the stars in the night sky, a love that would shine on forever and ever. Amen. The legacy of Leo and Ilara lived on long after they were gone. Their story became a local legend, a testament to the transformative power of kindness and the unexpected ways love can blossom. The garage, Vance, daughter Otto, remained a placeless daughter Aventis, cornerstone of the community, passed down through generations of mechanics who understood that their job was not just to fix cars, but to offer a helping hand, a listening ear, and a safe haven for those who were stranded on the highways of skipped life. The penthouse in the city was turned into a charitable foundation, the Vance Foundation, dedicated to providing resources and support for single parents and their children. It became a beacon of hope for countless families, a place where they could find not just financial assistance, but also a sense of community and belonging. Maya, following in her mother's footsteps, became a renowned human rights lawyer, fighting for the rights of the underprivileged and marginalized. She was a fierce and passionate advocate, a woman who used her power and privilege to give a voice to the voiceless. Her work was a tribute to her parents, a continuation of their legacy of compassion and service. The small house in the suburbs, with the big backyard and the old oak tree, became a cherished family home, a place where laughter and love echoed through the halls for generations to come. It was a place where memories were made, where dreams were born, and where the simple joy of being together was celebrated every day. And so the story of Leo and Ilara and Maya continued to unfold, a beautiful and enduring tapestry of love, family, and community. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that the greatest treasures in life are not material possessions, but the intangible gifts of love, kindness, and human connection. It was a story that taught them that true wealth is not measured in dollars and cents, but in the richness of our relationships and the depth of our compassion. It was a story that inspired them to be better people, to be more loving, to be more kind, to be more generous. It was a story that gave them hope, a story that reminded them that even in the darkest of times, there is always a light of love, a light of hope, a light that can guide us home, the spirit of Harmony Springs. The small town that had brought Leo and Alara together continued to thrive. It remained a place where neighbors helped neighbors, where community was more than just a word, it was a way of life. The town became a model for other communities, a shining example of what can be achieved when people work together for the common good. The story of Leo and Alara became a part of the town's folklore, a cherished tale that was passed down from one generation to the next. It was a story that was told around campfires, in classrooms, and on front porches, a story that never failed to bring a tear to the eye and a smile to the face. It was a story that reminded the people of Harmony Springs of their own capacity for kindness and compassion. It was a story that inspired them to be the best versions of themselves. And so, the legacy of Leo and Alara, a mechanic with a heart of gold and a billionaire with a soul of a poet, lived on not just in the town they had loved, but in the hearts of all who had been touched by their story. Their love was a ripple that spread far and wide, a wave of kindness and compassion that touched countless lives and made the world a better place. Their story was a love song, a symphony of hope, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to find love and light in the most unexpected of places, and their love, like the stars in the night sky, would continue to shine on forever, a beacon of hope and inspiration for all who dared to dream of a better world, a world where love truly does conquer all. The final chapter of their story was not an ending, but a beginning, a new chapter in the ongoing saga of love and kindness and community. It was a chapter that was written not in words, but in actions, in the lives of the people they had touched, in the community they had helped to build, and in the legacy of love they had left behind. Their story was a reminder that we are all connected, that we are all part of a larger human family, and that our lives are a tapestry woven together with the threads of our shared experiences, our shared hopes, and our shared dreams. It was a story that taught us that the greatest gift we can give to each other is the gift of ourselves, our time, our compassion, our love. And it was a story that reminded us that in the end, it is not what we have but what we give that truly matters. The story of Leo and Alara was a story for the ages, a timeless tale of love, redemption, and the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome adversity and to find hope and happiness. In the most unexpected of places, it was a story that would continue to inspire and to uplift for generations to come, a story that would forever be etched in the hearts and minds of all who heard it. It was a story of a love that was as pure and as true and as beautiful as a spring day, a love that would never fade, a love that would last for all of eternity. Amen. And so it was, and so it will always be the legacy of Leo and Alara, a love story for the ages, a testament to the power of the human heart to love, to heal, and to find its way home. Their love story became a cornerstone of modern folklore, a touchstone for those who believed that the world, for all its harshness, still held pockets of impossible magic. The Vance Foundation, under Maya's guidance, expanded its reach, creating not just shelters but educational programs, mentorship opportunities, and small business grants for single parents who, like her father once had, felt the weight of the world on their shoulders. Maya never married, but her life was full of a different kind of love. The love of a community she had nurtured, the love of a legacy she had honored, and the fierce protective love for the memory of the two people who had shown her that a family could be built from the most disparate of parts. She would often visit the old garage in Harmony Springs, which was now a designated historical landmark. The tools were still there, polished and preserved behind a velvet rope, and the faint smell of oil and old coffee still lingered in the air, a phantom scent of a life lived with purpose and passion. She would sit on the old stool where she had once colored, her fingers tracing the worn wood, and she would remember. She would remember the sound of her father's laughter, the warmth of Alara's embrace, the taste of burnt bacon, and the feeling of belonging. She would remember the day her world had broken down, and the day it had been put back together again, stronger and more beautiful than before. Her life was a testament to their love, a living, breathing embodiment of the values they had cherished. She was their legacy, their love story, their happily ever after. And in her heart, she knew that they were still with her, watching over her, guiding her, their love, a constant and unwavering presence in her life. She was not alone. She would never be alone. She was a Vance, and she was a daughter, and she was a product of a love that had defied all odds, a love that had bridged two worlds, a love that had created a legacy that would endure for all time. The final words of their story were not written in a book, but in the lives they had touched, the community they had built, and the love they had shared. It was a story that had no end, for it was a story that lived on in the hearts of all who believed in the power of love to change the world. It was a story of hope, a story of faith, a story of the enduring power of the human spirit. It was the story of Leo and Alara, a love story for the ages, a love story for all time. Amen. The oak tree in their backyard grew taller and wider, its branches reaching for the sky like arms outstretched in a silent prayer. The tire swing still hung from one of its sturdiest limbs, a weathered and worn testament to a childhood filled with laughter and joy. The house itself had settled into a comfortable old age, its walls holding the echoes of 1,000 happy memories. The world outside had changed, but within the walls of their home, time seemed to stand still. The love that had been born in a dusty garage and nurtured in a sterile penthouse had found its true home here, in this small house, in this quiet town, a love that was as constant and as unwavering as the northern star. Their story was a reminder that home is not a place, but a feeling, a sense of belonging, a safe harbor in the storm of life. It was a reminder that love is not a transaction, but a gift, a precious and fragile thing that must be nurtured and cherished. And it was a reminder that family is not defined by blood, but by love, by the bonds of affection and commitment that we forge with one another. The legacy of Leo and Alara was not one of wealth or power, but of love and kindness, of compassion and service. It was a legacy that was written not in stone, but in the hearts of the people they had loved, the community they had served, and the world they had made a better place. And as the sun set on another perfect day, casting a golden glow on the small house with the big backyard and the old oak tree, it was clear that their love story was far from over. It was a story that would continue to unfold, a story that would continue to inspire, a story that would continue to remind us all that the greatest love stories are not the ones we read in books, but the ones we live in our hearts. It was a story that was, and always would be, a beautiful and timeless testament to the enduring power of love. And so it was, and so it shall be, forever and ever. Amen.